Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Community Matters. It's a special show where we're on an earlier time and a much better time, and it's probably suited for the topic we've got today. What am I introducing you today? Well, I don't know if those of you that are following social media, we've got the upcoming Beautiful Mosques of the UK, or the Beauty of Your Mosque, shall I call it. That show is going to be coming up. So there's a few trailers and a few hints and talks about that on social media. And I thought I'll take the opportunity to use Community Matters to introduce that and talk about some of the stuff that we're doing. But in particular, we're going to be focusing on the very first mosque that we went there, and how befitting that was that we're going to be actually looking at the very first mosque of the UK. For those of you that believed it was Woking, and for those of you that had no idea at all, it is the Abdullah Quilliam Mosque in Liverpool. This was the very first mosque of the UK, and it was opened by none other than himself, Sheikh Abdullah Quilliam, formerly known as William Henry Quilliam. I'm showing off there, and I know quite a bit, and I shouldn't be doing that really. I needed my guests with me here today to talk about that, because these are the guys from the Abdullah Quilliam Society. They're here to talk about their masjid and how they've brought it back and restored this mosque and restored the original mosque of this country, the first convert to Islam in this country, and how they're going to carry on that legacy in the future they're looking forward to. Over to my right, I have some of the senior members of the Abdullah Quilliam Society. So I have Brother Mumin Khan and Brother Ghalib Khan, who'll tell us about their positions and their involvement. And over to my left, I shouldn't take any seniority out of it actually. We've still got senior members here, but to a different aspect, and a bit like me, a younger perspective, with respect of course. I have Brother Abdul Hamid here, who's a core member, and who will explain his role. And we've got a member of the community from Liverpool, and one of our very own as well, Brother Fakhrul Alam as well. So that's who I've got. That's what we're talking today. Those of you, if you're watching this on the repeat or getting this on YouTube, you might want to pause and have a quick look at what the Abdullah Quilliam Society is about, what the Abdullah Quilliam Mosque really is about, and how it actually was discovered as the very first masjid. But these brothers are going to talk about the legacy. I am going to start off by going over to my far right. First of all, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Brother, it's an honor to have you, and I think it was a shock for me, I mean, to meet you and meet you guys carrying on this legacy. But I think enough of me knowing what you guys do. I think we need to tell our whole audience about the Abdullah Quilliam Society. So before we do that, actually, not even the society, tell us about Abdullah Quilliam and the history behind this masjid.
Okay. Shall I look into the camera?
No, that's
okay. As you know, the Abdullah Quilliam, Sheikh Abdullah Quilliam became a Muslim in 1887. Prior to that, he actually spent 5 years in Morocco searching about Islam before he took Shahada. Not everybody knows about that. And 2 years later, in 1889, he opened the very first mosque in England on a Christmas day, 25th of December, 1889. And while he was running the establishment, he actually, around about 400 to 500 people became Muslims under his wing. And in that building, he actually had an orphanage where he had about 200 to 300 children that would be housed there, would be fed there, and would be taught maths, English, and science. Not necessarily that they were made into a Muslims, but they were orphanage, which he was doing as a service to humanity. I'm going to ask my chairman, Mr. Ghalib Khan, to say more about Abdullah Quilliam, so we can all share the history.
Just before we move on, I mean, your position and your role in the Abdullah Society
My position
today.
there is I'm the co-founder and the chief executive CEO of Abdullah Quilliam Society. I have been with this project almost from the very beginning, for almost now for about 14 years of the 15 years of its existence, with Mr. Khan and others.
So smoothly, we're going to introduce Brother Ghalib Khan. I mean, first and foremost, your position with the society.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Ghalib Khan. I'm a founding member and chairman of the Abdullah Quilliam Society. I came to Liverpool after working as an architect in Africa, and one of the first jobs was to look at recovering, and at that time little known mosque that existed in Liverpool. There was an old gentleman, much more senior to me, who was the founding chairman of the society, late Dr. Akbar Ali. He invited me, and we and a few other small group of Muslims got together, and we tried to discover, first of all, the history, how the mosque started. William Henry Quilliam, as you know, becoming Abdullah Quilliam, started initially having a temporary mosque not so far away from the present premises. He moved on to and bought this property, a listed building now, a Georgian listed building, and he bought subsequently properties, 5 properties next to it. So he had a substantial ownership of the Brome terraces, and he in 1889 opened the mosque, which was purpose built at the rear of the listed building. It's a small mosque, but very historic and important, because that's how that's probably the birthplace of Islam, as we want to term it, or even as BBC has termed it. And we are proud to be part of that, and especially the Bangladeshi community, I think, has played a major role. আমরা বাঙালিরাই সবচেয়ে প্রথম এই প্রজেক্টে চেষ্টা করেছি। আকবর আলী সাহেব যদিও ইন্ডিয়ান ছিল, উনি কলকাতায় বড় হয়েছে, তারপর আমাদেরকে সবাইকে নিয়ে ভেরিয়াস লোকাল অথরিটির সাথে ক্যাম্পেইন করে এই বিল্ডিংটা তখন ইউজ হতো কাউন্সিলের জন্য। They were using it as the birth, death and wedding registry office. They had vacated the property in 2000, and that was the opportunity and moment when we said we must get it. And we started a major campaign within Liverpool and got the council to finally offer us this property at a peppercorn rate of £1 if we develop and reopen the mosque. Inshallah, by the help of all the Muslims here, we managed to do that. But it has been a long struggle. It took us 14 years before we were able to open it in June 2014, because the building was vandalized, the roof was damaged, all the lead was stolen and water was pouring in. Initially, the first stage was, phase 1 was re-roofing the whole building, which was done in 2008. And then we did more fundraising and gradually opened the mosque section of the building. Currently, we're working on the rest of the building, and I hope that others will talk about it.
I need to touch on something. I'm going to make you go back a few steps, because 1999 is when the society was reformed, or formed, shall I say, actually.
Yes, it was registered as a charity.
It was registered as a charity in 1999, so it was only a few years prior to that that you really decided, you know, we need to go and get this piece of history back. A telling question for me, because my time with you guys in Liverpool was great, alhamdulillah, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. But what really intrigued me was a question I was thinking about when I was driving back. I mean, how something like this, the history of a registry office being the original mosque, you know, it was clear it was hidden away. I mean, it wasn't open news, and some of the locals I spoke to in Liverpool, they called it a myth. So how did it come to light to you guys that this was it? I mean, what was the story behind that?
There were several lone researchers all over the world, and Abdullah Quilliam had a huge publication house. He had circulated a lot of his writings. He had given talks all over the world. He'd been in Africa, in Middle East, and as far as Japan also. And these were picked up in researches by students and scholars from a long time ago.
Islamic students, or are we talking history students? You know,
history and
actual academic students were the ones that established this, found this, really.
Yeah, and Dr. Akbar Ali, I think, came in around 1947, 48 to UK, and he met a student who was doing his research in Manchester about Abdullah Quilliam.
Wow.
So he knew about it, but at that time there was not enough of unity among Muslims and getting everybody together. So it took a long time to build up support for it. The mosque itself was the record room for all the birth, death, wedding registry from 1908 to 2000. That's when they finally gave up the property. Abdullah Quilliam left in 1908, and that's when the building became vacant and the council took over the properties.
Right. I'm going to come over to this side, and I'm going to ask these young men around me. First of all, assalamu alaikum, Hamid Bey. Pleasure to have you. You're an interesting story now, aren't you? Because you're an original Londoner.
Yes, I actually grew up in the East End from Whitechapel. I grew up here in Whitechapel, Stepney, Bow. So this is my hunting grounds, as it were. I grew up here and decided to leave my business and property in London and travel up north. And I still wonder why I did that. This was back in 2001.
Okay, so fair amount of time.
Fair amount of time. And I'd worked all over London. I used to be a pharmacist. I still am a registered pharmacist. And I decided that the grass is greener elsewhere. And so retrained as a medical doctor in Liverpool. And this is where I suppose my eyes had opened, because I'd never travelled as far as Liverpool, maybe to Scotland once, but then everywhere else seemed like a very far and fetched place where nobody travelled outside London. So it was an interesting thing, because my idea was that I'll do my training and come back to London, because home is where the heart is, and home is still London for me, and this is where I have all my friends. So, but it's been an interesting journey, because as soon as I finished my training, I got sort of shown the Abdullah Quilliam project. And before that, for about 5 years, I'd sort of never knew anything about Abdullah Quilliam or England's first mosque. And all I knew was East London Mosque was probably the very oldest mosque that we have. And it was a great institution. And that's all I knew. I'd never seen any of the great mosques. I knew about the Woking Mosque. And certainly when Abdullah Quilliam Mosque, the society, approached me, I went to some of their events. This is where the history then hit me. And I thought this is really, you know, it's a surprising piece of history that we should learn about, that we should know about, because our next generation will need to know that Islam started in the UK. We didn't bring Islam from outside the UK, and we know the Indian subcontinent, there were huge amounts of migration from the Indian subcontinent, but actually Islam started from here. And that is something I'm trying to reconcile at the moment, even with my children, and the lot of PR that we do with the rest of the community in the UK. People still don't know England's first mosque is in the UK and in Liverpool. So we have a lot of visitors. Majority of them come from the Far East, would you believe?
Wow.
We have a lot of Europeans. A coachload of Muslims turned up before the mosque opened. This is a few years ago, and whilst we were still negotiating the terms with the council. So people turn up in coachloads wanting to see England's first mosque, and Liverpool is quite famous for many things. As we know, the Titanic was built there. As we know, the Beatles are from there, and the very first steam engine called the Rocket was built there. And indeed, you have England's first mosque. And also, I'm told, the very first lift was developed in Liverpool.
Wow.
So there's a lot of, Liverpool used to be...
And the tunnel as well.
Yes, absolutely. The Williamson tunnels, which are quite famous tunnels that were dug in those times. They're famous. But Liverpool has a huge, vast amount of history because it was the main trading port in the 18th and 19th century. And a lot of wealthy people actually lived in Liverpool. So it's a fantastic piece of history, and I'm glad that I was sort of shown the project, and I was allowed the opportunity to get involved, and through that I've really retained some of my connection to Liverpool. But I'm looking forward to coming back to London and finding my roots again.
Well, I mean, from what you told us, it's amazing, and we can see probably why you stayed over there, because yes, it's no doubt that's a beautiful amount of history you heard from these three gentlemen. We're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, we've got a video to see of their mosque and some of the things they discussed, and we probably want to know a bit more about Abdullah Quilliam, and then we want to look forward to what these guys are doing and what's going to come of the mosque. So don't go away. We'll be back very shortly.